I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker this year, Matt Murphy. I met Matt sophomore in high school on the soccer team at an all-boys school in Los Angeles called Loyola, and we instantly became best friends. I've seen Matt. Matt went to University of Santa Barbara, where he started the first date rape program to basically help women and educate people about date rape. So from that time through USD Law School, he's always advocated for the weak. He's dedicated his life to putting bad people away. Matt was spent 26 years in the Orange County DA's office, and 17 of those years were in homicide, and another 4 years in sexual assault. You may have seen him on a lot of his high-profile cases. In all those trials, he convicted 13 serial killers. He's tried about 133 cases, around 100 felonies, and he's undefeated. So he won his last, I think, 100-plus trials as a prosecutor. He's known commonly as the surfing DA, and he has been, again, in many high-profile cases. He currently works for ABC News as a legal analyst and consultant. He's been a frequent guest on Megyn Kelly, Chris Cuomo, Elizabeth Vargas, and even was recently on The View. So he's filled the range of people that he's given interviews for. He recently wrote a book called The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. It's now in the top 10 for audio downloads in the US. He just had a new show that he's involved with on Hulu. It's called Devil in the Desert, Wicked Game. He'll be talking about that. It's now number 4 for all content on Hulu, and it just dropped on Tuesday of this week. So I just want to welcome my good friend, our speaker this year, Matt Murphy.
So what Jimmy didn't mention is he was right wing and I was left fullback. So we met basically beating each other up every day in soccer. And eventually he's like, I think we could be friends. So this is going to be a wild ride. Hopefully, I've been told I can swear, so hopefully that's okay. Trigger warning wise, I asked this morning, I'm like, I got a few slides that are kind of graphic, and they're like, it's the insurance business and trial lawyers, so you're good. So I apologize ahead of time if any of it is too graphic, and I'm going to go fast. I'm going to go through 2 cases in particular. I was trying to figure out which one to take out, and I left them both in because I think you guys are going to love this, I hope. So some of you might recognize this, the old dating game clip. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Here's my book. I go through one of these cases in my book. The other one is hopefully book number 2. Serial killers are absolutely fascinating, and I want to talk about that. Here's a clip for a crazy case I did out of Newport Beach. I was the vertical deputy assigned to Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Laguna, and Irvine. And the way they do it in Orange County as a prosecutor, instead of that classic assembly line where the police investigate and one DA reviews it for filing and somebody else does the pretrial, somebody else does the prelim, the way it works down there is you get assigned the city and it's yours. So you get the call in the middle of the night, you go to the crime scene with your investigator, you step over the dead bodies, and you take the case all the way up through sentencing. And so I'm there with the lead detective that night. Lead detective is sitting next to me in the courtroom, and it's just a better mousetrap. But as a result, you see some crazy stuff, and I'm going to tell you guys some of that. So this was a case out of Newport. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. This just came out on Hulu the day before yesterday. Basically, marijuana dispensary owner. It's all cash business. Marijuana is the Wild West in California. They kidnap this guy. They torture him. They think they got a pile of money buried out in the desert, and they didn't. There was no money out there. So they cut off this guy's penis. and the mastermind, by the time we figure out who it is, flees to Iran, the one country that's never going to extradite, and the game was on. And it's about hunting a really bad guy and trying to lure him out of Iran. So you can check that out. I promised Jimmy that I would talk about this. So, but let's get into serial killers. Definition of a serial killer under the FBI: the unlawful killing of 2 or more victims by the same offender in separate events, which sounds pretty clean. Problem is, that includes pretty much everybody. That's medical professionals that are doing mercy killings. That's gang members who can shoot straight. That's friggin' everybody. We all remember this? Okay, so when I got to homicide, I thought I knew what serial killers were all about because, of course, like all of us, I'd seen Silence of the Lambs, right? You got it puts the lotion in the basket. The Buffalo Bill was the name of this character, and he was sort of loosely based on a real guy, kind of, but it was a lot of dramatic license taken. This is from a book by John Douglas, who's amazing. He was the FBI original profiler. Big fan of his. But the truth is, the sort of the quintessential movie, we got him and Hannibal Lecter. One guy was trying to change himself by killing women and wearing their skin, right? And another guy just wanted to eat everybody. And the truth is, so I get into homicide, and I'm looking for Buffalo Bill, and I spent 4 years in sexual assault before I got to homicide, and I realized pretty soon after getting there that the serial killers seemed a lot like the serial rapists that I've been dealing with for 4 years in sexual assault. And I kept looking for this horribly abused guy as a youth that was, almost sympathetic in their tortured, upbringing or whatever it may be. And what I kept encountering over and over again on the real serial killers were completely self-absorbed, narcissistic pricks. Okay, and I'm going to go into a little bit more of that. Okay, modern American psychopath. The diagnostic features, this is all basically out of the DSM. High intelligence. Think Ted Bundy, right? Superficial charm. Pathological egocentricity. Pathological lying. Manipulative behavior. Grandiose images of themselves. Almost delusional sense of self-confidence. Zero empathy for others. And utter lack of remorse or shame. Okay, some of you have heard this before. Classic psychopathy. There's a guy named Park Dietz who's an expert that I use on a bunch of my high-profile murder cases. He's brilliant. He did like the Branch Davidians. He did Dahmer, like you name it, the case. He's been brought in. I'm the world's foremost forensic psychiatrist in this. And we're going through these on the evening of a big trial where I was calling him, and he's like, yeah, so here's what you look for psychopathy or a psycho. And he finishes the list and he kind of looks off into space, and he goes, every time I deal with one of these guys, I just think to myself, wouldn't it be great? Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. Wouldn't it just be wonderful? You have no guilt. The world exists to serve you. And anyways, you guys know a lot of psychiatrists are halfway crazy, but he's the guy's the best. And these are the features. But when you think about it, that doesn't make you a killer. All psychopaths are certainly not serial killers. All serial killers are absolutely psychopaths. And psychopaths, the American Psychological Association says up to 30% of the American population has psychopathic tendencies, and up to 1% of the population of the world are flat out psychopaths. Okay, which if you think about it is a huge number. So the reality is we deal with these people all the time. They tend to do great in business because when you have absolutely no morals, no ethical compass, no empathy, and no concern, and you're intelligent, charming, and smart, you tend to advance in the business world. So we deal with people like this all the time that just don't kill anybody. Okay, so as I kind of began my journey in the DA's office, I found a book called Psychopathia, Sexualis. This is written by a guy named Dr. von Krafft-Ebing, who's a contemporary of Freud, and he tried to figure out, it's the first real academic attempt to figure out serial killers. And he put it on a relational spectrum of paraphilias. In other words, he looked at them as sex crimes, which, unlike Hannibal Lecter, unlike Buffalo Bill, who aren't trying to have sex with anybody, the archetype of the true serial killer. There's a sexual component. And he started out, this was in the 1880s, and he covered, of course, we all know who this is, right? Jack the Ripper, right? So he has a section on Jack the Ripper, but he also had Vacher the Ripper. And one of the biggest, most persistent myths in the realm of serial killers is we think this is a product of childhood abuse, it's a product of modern America, the disaffected youth, whatever. And when you get into the history of it, you learn pretty quickly that it's neither modern nor American. And listen to this. There's a guy named Vacher the Ripper, who he talks about in this book, born of honorable parents and belonged to a mentally sound family. He never had a severe illness and was from his earliest infancy vicious, lazy, and shy of work. Okay, so this is a guy that's running around murdering everybody in the French countryside in the 1800s. Not American, not a product of us, not our fault. And turns out these guys go all the way back to ancient Rome and probably far beyond that. Okay, so one of the most common questions I would get as a prosecutor, and we've all heard it, is what could make that man do that, right? Like what made him do that? And I've got a couple of answers for that. Or another one is why? Why would they do that? And the answer to why they do it is because they friggin' want to do it. And the why is a really interesting question academically. It's a really interesting question medically. But for our purposes as trial lawyers and people in the insurance world, the real answer, and sorry, I'm going to swear here, who fucking cares? Okay? It's like when your job is to catch them and put them away and stop them from hurting anybody else, I don't care why. Okay, but here is the final condemnation. This is when they finally caught him. This is the judge. His crimes are those of an antisocial, sadistic, bloodthirsty being who considers himself privileged to commit these atrocities because he was once upon a time treated in an asylum for insanity and thereby escaped a well-merited punishment. He's a common criminal and there are no ameliorating circumstances to be found in his favor. He was sentenced to death. So that's the French judge way back in the day, hundreds of years ago, who absolutely, in my experience, nailed it. Okay, so one of the cases I did was the Golden State Killer. I had D'Angelo. I was the Orange County prosecutor, and one of the things you start seeing themes with these guys. They, for example, love to collect trophies. Who knows why? Who friggin' cares why? But they do. They collect trophies. Another thing is, because they're so superficially charming and because they're so intelligent, they also believe that they're the smartest person in the courtroom, and whatever allows them to do these sorts of crimes, whatever motivates them to do it, it also disconnects them from the jury, so they can't read the room. So basically, at trial, they all suck, but they all want to represent themselves. So when they represent themselves, you got to deal with them, including the case I'm going to get into here in a second. So, one of my cases, Anna Kendrick just made a movie out of it, Woman of the Hour. I got a funny story to share with that. Here's the set. She was wonderful to deal with, by the way, for the Anna Kendrick fans. She is absolutely amazing, super funny, really, really nice person, and sort of a new friend. They brought me in as a consultant on it, had a blast working with her, and I hope I don't forget. If I do forget, hit me up after. I have a story to tell you about the premiere and her manager who sat next to me. Okay, so here is Rodney James Alcala. Rodney, in line with what I was just talking about, is he was born in a nice family. He was never abused or bullied by anybody. He had a registered Mensa level IQ. This guy had a mom who loved him. His brother went to West Point, became a war hero in Vietnam. Every advantage that you could ever want in life. Okay. June 20th, 1979, a little 12-year-old named Robin Samso disappeared from Huntington Beach. She was 12, walked down to the beach around 2:45, approached by a man with a camera. Can I take your pictures? It's for a photo class. Takes pictures of her and her friend, scurries away when a mom shows up. You don't have to read all these. And this is her friend, Bridget Wilbert, who as a 12-year-old put together this composite. Sorry, I'm having problems with my clicker here. There we go. Okay, pretty amazing 12-year-old, right? Turns out, Detective Art Droz, who's working on this case, they get a call from a probation officer who says, you know what, I just saw this composite you guys released. This is 1979, so pre-internet, of course. And he said, you got to look at one of my old parolees. His name's Rodney Alcala. And he gets the phone call, and these guys have been working the missing persons case for 24 hours. Art Droz, whose wife was the artist who put together the composite, goes home, opens a beer, sits down on the couch. He's going to take a nap for a few hours and go back to work, turns on the dating game, and they announce Rodney Alcala. And this guy went on the friggin' dating game and he won it, which is the basis of Anna Kendrick's movie. Okay, and that's a clip from him on the dating game. So a few days later, the scavenger remains of poor Robin were found in Altadena. They serve a search warrant on his car. They get in there, carpet's been replaced, windows had been tinted. Okay. They get into a storage locker up in Seattle that he had, and we find a whole bunch of jewelry. Now this is a trophy case. Okay, so we did DNA testing and found almost no DNA to anybody. And we also found thousands and thousands and thousands, and by we, I was 12 years old when this happened, but the police back then found thousands of photos. And this guy was a graduate of UCLA Film School. In 1968, he kidnapped a little girl named Robin Samsa, Tally Shapiro, as she was walking to school. 8 years old, kidnaps her, Good Samaritan sees it, calls it in, finds a payphone. Police officer named Chris Camacho shows up first day back at work after getting shot in the Watts riots, after being shot in Vietnam. So he's like 23 years old, he's already been shot twice, and this doesn't sound right to him, so he kicks the door in, and he sees naked Rodney running out the back of the house, and this little 8-year-old gurgling out on the kitchen floor. She's been raped, she's got a barbell on her throat, and it's like, catch the bad guy or save the little girl. Saves the little girl, she's in a coma for 32 days. The guy flees to New York. He's caught 3 years later. He graduated from UCLA Film School. He enrolled in NYU Film School under a different name, and a couple of the little campers at this all-girls sleepaway camp go to the post office to duck out of a rainstorm, and they look at the 10 most wanted list of the FBI, and they're like, hey, there's Mr. Berger. Maybe this isn't right. So they catch Rodney, they extradite him, and this will piss you off because it should. They gave him a life sentence for that case, and he's paroled in 34 months, okay? And after being paroled, Rodney Alcala murdered about 100 people. So it's a cautionary tale in my fair state of California as we tack hard back to let's give them hugs and release them again. Sorry, it's madness, but okay. So we find thousands and thousands and thousands of these photos of young boys, young girls, young women in various positions of vulnerability. Here's just some highlights. And he's working in Southern California. And his routine was, hey, you're a model. I could win a contest. Let me take your picture. Look at this one. She was never identified. Neither was she. Okay. But also in there, we find these pictures of 15-year-old Lori Wirtz. And what happens is he gets convicted in 1979. He's sentenced to death. Rose Bird, some of you remember her, hard death penalty anti-death activist, very Californian, Supreme Court justice appointed by Jerry Brown, never affirmed a death case, right? So she reverses it, comes back, it gets retried in 1986. He's sentenced again, and basically on the return unremitted, and you guys understand this, becomes law of the case. So one of the things, they introduced a bunch of his priors, and Rosebird said, not proper, violates his constitutional rights, can't use it. Even though the law in California had changed, and now we can use priors, it became a law of the case, so we couldn't touch any of the priors, they were not available. Gets convicted again, 86, goes up, California Supreme Court, no problem, gets to the Ninth Circuit. They reverse it for the admission of a bunch of other evidence. So it winds up on my desk in 2002, and it's been gutted twice. And I've got the composite, and it looks a lot like him, I think, and almost nothing else. And we're trying to figure out, can we time when he was taking pictures? And this girl kept a diary that summer. This is so cool. Kept a diary, and on that day, it was the same day that Robin disappeared, that strip mall in the background had not been rebuilt, and all of those poles were the same. So as trial lawyers, what do? My whole thing is, can I time this to her disappearance? We find a guy in the Navy, some meteorologist, who specializes basically in sundials, and we're able to measure the poles and take the shadows and figure out exactly when Rodney was there. So I'm about to roll on shadows and that composite, right? And I went to my boss, Lou Rosenblum, and I'm like, and he's the one that assigned me this thing, and I'm like, what do we do with this? Like, there's no evidence. And his response was, when it comes to guys like Alcala, he said, never give him a deal. He goes, it's up to you, but if he's ever gonna be free again, make him beat you, so you can look back and know that you did everything you could to keep him in. So I'm over the moon because I've got the Navy guy to come in, and I like that. I think a jury's gonna eat it up. But no sooner does that happen, oh, and I'm sorry, her photo was found in the storage locker. Okay, so we were able to, we put out, or back then they put out a thing, who's this girl? Her friend of, like, one of the mom's friends came out, that's Lori, and so the whole case came together. Okay, no sooner is the ink dry on the return remitter, which was written by a judge whose name I'll leave out, who absolutely believed that Rodney Alcala had been railroaded. Like, we start getting DNA hits because CODIS finally goes online in California. So this is a 32-year-old legal secretary named Charlotte Lamb, beautiful woman, came out, actress model from the Midwest, like so many others, to LA. She was found in El Segundo, strangled to death in 1977 after he'd been released. Jill Barcombe, 18 years old, found on the side of a road. These, not too graphic, it's mostly PG, but she's been posed. Her hand is on her vagina. Her face has been smashed in with a rock. She has multiple ligatures on her neck. And both of these women, all of his victims, unlike a lot of these guys, especially the next one I'm about to get into, who prey on sex workers, Rodney would prey on women in bars and other places. He'd follow people home that are like, they're totally innocent, doing nothing wrong, just living their lives, not putting themselves in positions of vulnerability. Georgia Wickstead, 27-year-old pediatric cancer nurse, talked about contributing to society. She was in Malibu. He got her. She was living alone. There was a palm print found on the thing. He raped her with the hammer and then killed her with it. So absolutely sadistic. Jill Barcombe was 20, Burbank computer engineer, and they threw away all the evidence in her case after 1979. So my deal, since these are all LA County, I went up to Steve Cooley, the old DA up there, who's great, and it's like, look, let me try all your cases with mine. We had to take it to the Supreme Court in order to do a multi-jurisdictional prosecution like that. She had an open jewelry box. Sorry, this is as bad as it gets, but we've got, these are our 4 victims from Los Angeles, all very similar ligature marks. Of course, you guys know what the scratches are around that. That's from them trying to get the ligatures off themselves. And the coroners all testified that what he would do is choke them out, render them unconscious, let them come back, gain consciousness again, and then do it again. And he would do this for hours. Okay, so For Joe Parenteau with no evidence, the left side of the screen was cut, just like Georgia Wick said. Alcala was left-handed. Okay, sorry. So here's my boy, Rockin' Rodney Alcala. For the third trial, of course he went pro per, so he's representing himself. And one of the fascinating things, guys, is we always think this about serial killers, right? Like, who would be dumb enough to get in the van? I wouldn't get in the van. Who would get in the van, right? Like, who would agree to go alone with some random photographer out into the woods? Like, it's almost a survival thing we do psychologically. Like, we want to feel safe in our own minds. Like, I would never do that until you actually meet one of these guys. So I'd had this case for years. He goes pro per. Now I've got to deal with him every single day. And about 5 minutes into the first conversation, it's like, oh, that's why they got in the van. Because he's super charming, he's super intelligent, and it was fascinating dealing with this guy. So here's our record. He testified, called himself to the stand, which was fantastic, because it was like he asked himself questions in the third person. Mr. Alcala, may I mention you look particularly handsome today? Why, thank you. So one day he comes in, I had to share this. He got thumped in the hallway coming in, because there's a famous case, and one of the other prisoners who's going back to the jail got him, spit on him, and headbutted him. And Rodney comes in, and the psychopath, the only human being that matters to them is them, right? So he comes in, now he's got this mouse on his head, and this is bad, but this case can't get reversed. And he comes in and he's like, oh, I can't do it today. And this judge, who's a Vietnam War vet, who is awesome, Briseño, he did not give a shit that Rodney was having a bad day. So I'm like, Rodney, nowadays we have cameras on our phones. Let me get a photo of that, because obviously you want to include that in the record, because the judge is going to make you go today. So he lifts it up his little mouse, and I take pictures of it, and I'm immediately texting it to all the detectives in the back row. Somehow I don't think it ever made it into the record, but anyway, tons of media. Here are our victims. And without going too deep into the weeds on this, for the Jill Parenteau case, remember, no DNA. I've got a screen cut on the left-hand side. I've got an open jewelry box, and I've got a couple of her friends at a place called the Handlebar Saloon in Pasadena that saw a guy who looked like Rodney the last time they saw their friend. And in the eccentricity of the serial killer's mind, he really wanted the owner's manual, for whatever reason, to his Datsun B210 station wagon, right? So I send my lead investigator, Pat Ellis, comes down, comes back, and they still had the car. And he's like, hey man, he goes, I got good news and I got great news. He goes, the good news is I found the fucking owner's manual, so we've got him. He goes, and the great news is, in the stuff in the glove compartment, I also found this, and it was a matchbook to the Handlebar Saloon in Pasadena. It's the first connection, and this is late 70s, law enforcement, no computers, nobody's talking to each other, and we got him on that. And her family was showing up every single day, and imagine that, you're denied justice all that time, and because his weird, crazy, I want my owner's manual, we get the best clue of the entire case. Jury does him and everything. He's convicted, sentenced to death for a third time, and died a cold, lonely death in California Medical Facility a couple years ago. Okay, now let me go on to the fun one. Nobody's heard about this one. There's been almost no media, and I'm going to throw in some slides on cross-examining expert witnesses on this. And please don't take offense at the word fun for anybody who's sensitive. Okay, but it was fun. Robin Branley, 1986. She is totally innocent. She is a member of, she's going to school at Saddleback City College in Orange County. She's walking out to her car after a recital that she was an usher for, and she's attacked from behind, stabbed multiple times. They find her with her dress hiked up, almost like it's an interrupted rape, which of course it was. 1986, has no enemies, nobody knows who did it, and it basically goes unsolved, okay? Now for those of you who know, Southern Orange County abuts the Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base, okay? So this goes unsolved. Family is heartbroken. She was loved by everybody. Okay. A couple years later, 18-year-old Jennifer Spencer, 19 years old. She's basically just graduated from high school. She's working with handicapped kids. Never been in love before. She's so young. She's late for work. She accepts a ride from a stranger who drives her to work, no problem. She finishes her shift, comes out, same guy is waiting for her, gets in the car because there's no problems going there, so she's 19, she's not really thinking. They start driving and he doesn't stop where he's supposed to. Next thing she knows, they're on their way out into the desert where there are bodies everywhere, by the way, Southern California desert. And they're heading out into the middle of nowhere. He beats her with a pistol, sexually assaults her, throws her in the trunk of the car, and keeps driving into the desert. And she knows that she's going to die, and he's vicious, and also choked her out repeatedly, and when she would wake up, she said she saw the eyes of the devil. And so she's in the trunk, figures out how to unlatch the trunk, jumps out, and on a desert road, there's 2 cars coming. And she runs up to the first car. She's naked, she's bloody, and it's an elderly couple who kind of does this and keeps driving. And the second was a pickup truck with like 2 25-year-old guys in it who are like, let's go get the guy. And she's like, no, you don't understand. He's got a gun. Oh, and when she hopped out of the trunk, she looks back. He's chasing her with a machete. It's like something out of a horror movie. And it's like she got just enough progress to the cars for him to turn around and split. Unidentified. Police weren't sure her story was even real. Not treated super great, but again, unsolved. Years later, a sex worker named Julianne McGee goes missing in Palm Springs area, and her body is recovered, again, partially scavenged, in same area where Jennifer Spencer, same general area out there, California desert. She was identified by her tattoos. One of the responding police officers, it was his sister-in-law. She'd like gone off the rails with drugs, recognizes the tattoo, and she gets identified. Marianne Wells and her son, and this is kind of interesting. So this woman, again, just got into drugs, made some bad decisions, but truly loved her little boy. Her little boy loved her. They were living in hotels. She was living that lifestyle. And she was found in San Diego, shot with a .45 caliber handgun. Tammy Lee Irwin, 18, never really clear what she was doing. She could have been totally innocent, or she may have been working as a sex worker. Not that that doesn't make her innocent in the context of a homicide. That's her and her dad. Her dad showed up to every single day of the trial. 18 years old, also found shot. Denise Manny, known sex worker, found in the desert, sprawled out. Okay, so all of those cases in the Palm Springs area go unsolved. Then we get into a woman named Laura Ulaki, found in a place called Wolf Lake outside of Chicago in 1996, so 10 years after Robin Brantley. Followed very quickly by Cassie Quorum. Vermilion River feeds into Wolf Lake, and the police know they got a serial killer. Lynn Huber, another sex worker, August 2nd, 1996, found floating in Wolf Lake, stabbed, shot, bound with tape, and naked. And what's interesting is that you see the evolution of this guy. Starts with the public area, then he starts going to secluded lots near homes, to the open desert at night, to this Wolf Lake place, which is remote. So you see the evolution of a serial killer. He starts out with women who will fight to women who will always get in his car, which sex workers will do. Forensics leaves the victim's clothed, then he starts getting rid of the clothing. He starts with a knife, then he moves to the gun, then a gun and a knife, and you see him getting better at it. Okay, so Gary, Indiana, some beat cop in a high prostitution, high drug area encounters some prostitute who's like, hey, this guy wants to take me to Wolf Lake and people keep disappearing. He contacts him and he sees a gun in the car, takes the gun, submits it, no follow-up is done on it, and then like 6 months later, people keep turning up dead in Wolf Lake. And he's like, wait, there was that Wolf Lake guy. The day before the gun is supposed to get destroyed, he goes back, pulls it out of evidence. They do what's called a Niven search, where they look at the ballistics. All of those women match to that gun. And the gun is registered to a guy named Andrew Urdialis. Oh no, I lost my photos. Okay, so Murphy's Law, guys, I'm sorry. Every single time I've done a PowerPoint, and I've done dozens and dozens, something goes wrong. So my videos all went out for whatever reason on our system. Whatever it is, it's user error. It's my fault, not these guys. But anyway, so I'll have more photos of him, hopefully, that turn up. Okay, so defense for him is fetal alcohol. Okay, fetal alcohol. And fetal alcohol is a real thing. And the question is, how does that affect premeditation and deliberation? I really wish I had these pictures so you guys could see them. Okay. Okay, so family, basically they bring in her family members and they bring in a whole bunch of experts. And the funny thing about capital case litigation is you'll get people who are professionals who really do excel in their field, who are politically, religiously, or whateverly opposed to the death penalty. And the ancient philosophical concept of do the ends justify the means, that the ancient Romans figured out, the answer is no. For them, they believe the death penalty is barbaric. So a lot of them will come in and they will bullshit on behalf of these people, and they basically will sell out their opinions in order to advance the greater good of eliminating the death penalty. No offense to anybody here who is opposed to it. It's just when you're talking about professional obligations to tell the truth, especially when you're talking about doctors or psychiatrists or whatever, they will do that, and you encounter that over and over again in capital case litigation. Some of you have probably experienced that before. So they bring in Dr. Ken Jones, who's billed as the father of fetal alcohol syndrome. And, okay, I hope. Give me a photo. Oh, okay. All right, so Dr. Richard Adler is one of these guys. His name is Dr. Dick Adler. Dr. Adler comes in, and you really have to see the face to truly appreciate all things Dr. Adler. But he comes in, and our cross-examination begins with the following. One of my law clerks finds this awesome clip, which is somehow on this, but it won't play. He is super arrogant. He's a psychiatrist, right? He is like, and I found this, my law clerk found this clip of him at a conference. And in the conference, he says, he's at the podium, and he's describing fetal alcohol and what to look for and the way it appears to like just lay people. And he says, they behave like they are mildly mentally retarded. Okay, that's what he says. They're mildly mentally retarded. And you guys all know, the way you learn these subjects, if you have an expert, the best way to do it is you learn from them. You read their textbook, you read their articles. You never know what you're looking for until you find it. But in this case, I found they behave like they're mildly mentally retarded. Okay, Andrew Urdialis joined the Marine Corps. He was in Operation Desert Storm. He got a friggin' medal, and he was a Marine Corps radioman. So his job is from the forward observer, who radios information to him, to relay it to the battalion artillery guys who are going to shoot gigantic bombs through the air. And one of the central features of real fetal alcohol syndrome is no short-term memory. That's one of the things that in the real medical condition, no short-term memory. So when you think about it, the worst friggin' job in the world for somebody that's actually suffering from a medical condition that prevents you from remembering things would be a Marine Corps radioman. Okay? So anyway, I just want to kick it off with this guy doesn't appear, look like, or in any way seem mildly mentally retarded. So we begin with the question, would you agree? And the key on these guys, of course, is always you quote them, right? Would you agree as a general proposition, doctor, that if you're suffering from FASD, that they behave like they're mildly mentally retarded? And he goes, what did you say? like, would you agree they behave like they're mildly mentally retarded? He goes, we do not use that word, sir. We do not use that word. And I've got his video clip of him at this conference, and it's the next slide, which is on here someplace, so my apologies. But it's literally him at the podium going, and they behave like they're mildly mentally retarded. And I'm like, and I got to, I don't know how many of you have seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High with Jess Piccoli and Mr. Hand. Like, if I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time? You know, so I'm like, oh, we don't use that word, do we? Well, let's see if you recognize who this person is. And I press play, it's him at the podium. They behave like they're mildly mentally retarded. I'm like, that's your word and you're using it. And since I'm quoting you, I'm using it. I think that means we do use the word retarded. So, oh gosh, any of you that are interested, it's on my PowerPoint. I'll show it to you. It's great. Okay, so the defense opening. These 5 murders were never going to be solved. So what they do is after the gun, they bring him in, and this is Chicago PD. This guy's straight out of Central Casting, and he confesses to all the cases in Chicago, and then he confesses to a bunch of the California cases. So what he's trying to do in the mitigating factor phase of the death penalty part, so it's bifurcated, you have the guilt phase, then you have the penalty phase. Jury considers mitigation. One of the points he wants the jury to consider is he basically solved the cases himself. None of us would be here if it wasn't for him. Give him a big break, okay? Which is like the guy pleading for sympathy because he's an orphan after killing both of his parents, right? Okay, so this is from his opening. The only person responsible for solving any of these 5 California murders is Andrew Urdiales himself. Remember, he's the one who solved these crimes, and it's just every time he opens his mouth, he's the hero. So, okay, and here's another one. Remember, Andrew Urdiales himself, it was ad nauseum. Oh, give me photos. Okay, good, I got some at least. Okay, so on the, one of the victims, he left a condom with full DNA in it. So her DNA is on the outside, his DNA is on the inside to like 1 in 17 octillion, which isn't even a real number, or maybe it's quadrillion. It's more than I can count to with my bad math anyway. It's him. And she's shot, and there's expended shell casings everywhere at all these scenes. So this was my actual slide. There's absolutely no evidence that would have led to authorities to Mr. Urdiales, except for the DNA inside the condom found next to the body of Marianne Wells, 1 in 84 trillion, and the expended shell casing next to that, which matched the expended shell casing next to Julie McGee, which also matched the expended shell casing next to Tammy Irwin, and also the National CODIS DNA system and the National NIBIN system, which compares expended shell casings found at scenes, and Touch DNA, and a lot of hardworking, dedicated people. Other than that, nobody would have solved it, and he deserves all the credit. Another thing, he held nothing back for hours of interviews, and nothing he said was ever false or inaccurate. This photo, if I got it, yeah, sorry. This is Robin Brandley. She fought like a tiger. So these are all defensive wounds. You guys recognize that. She was grabbing the knife. And his interview, did she try to stop you? Answer, no. Did she try to grab the knife? I mean, because it seems like it would have kind of pissed you off. Did she try to grab the knife? No, nothing. She just laid there. Which might be how he actually remembered it, but not exactly the hero of the hour that deserves any mitigation. Okay, another thing, one of the experts, no nurturing at all, no bonding, no loving care. And photos say 1,000 words, and I know you guys have all had that experience. You get a stack of photos from someplace in Discovery. So here's one, that's his grandma. That's him as a kid holding a friggin' puppy. Here's his mom. Okay, so again, that whole myth of like the abused child thing, Andrew Urdiales was loved, and what actually happened was his older brother was killed in Vietnam, and his mother coddled him as the youngest. Always put him at the front of the line. Nobody abused or bullied this kid, just like nobody abused or bullied Rodney Alcala ever for a minute. Mr. Urdiales did not have friends or girlfriends in the traditional sense because he lacked the skills to acquire them. This is one of the experts. And these are all the people that we heard about, except for all of his buddies in the Marine Corps and all the girlfriends he had and the fiance. So these are all the people in his life and the photos that we had. Okay, and this is awesome. This photo down here at the bottom. Okay, so what do we learn about fetal alcohol? Mothers have to drink during pregnancy. They're often frankly alcoholic, and this was from the textbook written by one of their experts. So all of their quotes, right? Frankly alcoholic with a host of other problems. Social services are often involved. They have a low birth weight, which he didn't have. Smooth philtrums, okay? I didn't know what a philtrum was before I got this case. Many of you probably still don't. I'm gonna answer an eternal mystery you've all had. What is this thing we have here on our upper lip? That is a philtrum. For whatever reason, biologically, people really suffering from fetal alcohol tend to have thin upper lips and smooth philtrums. It's one of the last things that develops. For whatever reason, human biology, that's the deal. Okay, low birth weight, smooth philtrums, small eye openings, thin lips, and they cannot extend their fingers. And they have developmental delays. They have low IQ. They have memory problems. Disorganized and disruptive as children. Diagnosed with learning disabilities. They lie and steal and have difficulty following rules. They have motor control problems throughout their lives. They function as if they are intellectually disabled / brain damaged, or in the words of Dick Adler, like they're mildly mentally retarded, okay? Which literally none of those things applied to Andrew Urdialis, okay? And this is awesome, okay? Dr. Kenneth Lyons, the grandfather of fetal alcohol syndrome. So this guy is recognized. He wrote an article in The Lancet. It appeared in the early 70s, and he's been credited for his entire career with being the discoverer of fetal alcohol, okay? And I've got 2 law clerks working for me on this case, and one of them spoke French, okay? And they're like, you send them out, they're like wolves, I'm sending them out like puppies with bones, bringing stuff in. One of these women, okay, here I got to quote it. The phrase fetal alcohol, this is from the defense opening, did not even exist until after 1973 when researchers first recognized the condition. He was a doctor by the name of Kenneth Jones who, along with a colleague, coined the phrase in the world's first published research article in a peer-reviewed medical journal identifying FAS. That was a November 3rd, 1973 issue of The Lancet. In fact, you get to hear from Dr. Jones, the grandfather of FASD, because he personally examined Andrew Urdialis and diagnosed him with FASD, okay? I'm listening to that in opening thinking, wow, this is an impressive guy. And he is, and he's contributed to modern medical science, but he's also an anti-death penalty advocate, okay? So, I discovered fetal alcohol under oath. And one of my law clerks comes to me in the middle of trial and says, hey, I found this article written in French from 1968 from a guy who was a colleague of Ken Jones' mentor, Dr. Paul Limon, and literally this is the discoverer of fetal alcohol. 1968, they had a professional connection. Nobody knew this. And my little law clerk comes in, and this is a frickin' home run, right? And so this guy and he was finally recognized in 1988. He wrote this thing. He's a practicing pediatrician who first wrote the first published medical article on this. Okay, so this is from Ken Lyons' textbook. Okay, he didn't read any of the medical reports, didn't read any police reports, didn't examine any of the siblings, but he did diagnose him with a smooth philtrum and FASD, right? So here's what they actually look like. Smooth upper lip, no philtrum, right? These are photos from his textbook. His philtrum is smooth with an Ashley Clarence score of 4, whatever that means. Okay, so here's a picture of Urdialis. I don't know. Here he is at his arrest. He has a more pronounced philtrum than anybody in this room. And by the way, in an era where cops are getting a bunch of crap, I got to share the story. This guy here on the right, this is the lead investigator, straight out of Central Casting, thickest Chicago accent you've ever heard, detective all day long. This is an old case. Urdialis was prosecuted and sentenced to death in Illinois before Governor Gary Ryan commuted them all blanketly. Then he gets prosecuted in Indiana. Same thing happens there. So we extradite him to California to do our cases. This guy had cancer. He's living in Tennessee. Old cop, been retired for years. I really needed him to establish all this. I call him up, and he's like, where do you need me and when? Showed up to take care of business. So that's Andrew Urdialis. That's his very pronounced philtrum. Inability to extend fingers and thumbs of his hands bilaterally. So here's from the textbook. They can't extend their fingers. But Urdialis, when he murdered Robin Brandley, we believed he cut his hand, okay? And so they were looking for scars. So far, so good. Might have a problem with his fingers. Oops. Pointing out the scar on his hand. Looks like he can extend his fingers to me. Can't extend fingers? And here he is, my favorite, the Shaka sign in the Marine Corps. You can't do that if you can't extend your fingers. And this is from that guy. I decided I want to give back. I already told you what spatial processing means. I'm not sure of anything anymore. And his whole thing was, he said, smooth means smooth, smooth means smooth, and I am not wrong. Okay, so I got to hit him with all those, and I got to hit him with the Paul Lamont thing, and I'm like, sure you're the grandfather of that? Okay, if you say so. Anyway, okay, the three amigos, reasonable doubt for a reasonable price. These guys travel the country. There is Dr. Dick Adler. Okay, and these two people, they go as a trio, and they go to these defense symposiums. They travel around the country. They charge a boatload to diagnose everybody with fetal alcohol who's facing a death penalty case. Okay, so Dr. Connor, again, doesn't read a bunch of this stuff. And one of the things in his textbook was 3/4 of the subjects with FASD demonstrated deficits in motor function outside the range of comparison subjects. Adults with FASD perform poorly. Basically, they have tremors. Okay? Our guy was a friggin' range master in the Marine Corps with an M16 rifle. Okay, and some of you shoot, okay, some of you shoot rifles. There's no such thing as a micro tremor and an M16 expert rating. Does not happen, can't happen. Memory, and I love this. Worst job in the world? Would you agree? Worst job in the world. Dr. Connor, like short-term memory loss, you got to radio in coordinates that somebody literally has just told you, and if you get something wrong, the bomb lands someplace else. His answer, yeah, here it is. Hypothetically, how about somebody whose job it is to take information related to them over a radio that they have to repeat verbally to somebody else, giving very precise coordinates for artillery to fly through the air and blow things up? Would you agree that that is probably the worst job in the world for somebody who suffers from this? Answer, I can't agree with that. Okay, let me move on here. Natalie Novak Brown. And the thing about it, as a prosecutor, if any of these guys, it's like soccer, anything gets through the net with these a-holes, you lose. All you need is one juror, right? Never testified for the prosecution. She's one of those, right? She made over $1 million over the last couple of years working for these guys. And let me just skip here. Okay, I was told being a radio operator is one of the easier jobs in the Marines. Complete bullshit. She doesn't research it. She doesn't do anything. I think I got a photo here. Yeah. Here's my question. If you look at the photos here at least, would you agree that at least on the surface this equipment looks pretty sophisticated? Would you agree? Answer, I have no idea. Okay. But where it gets really good with her, she comes in and says IQ is almost meaningless because you had an IQ of 116, okay, which is above average at least. Okay, so it's like, it means almost nothing. And I got to do a Forrest Gump thing, like, Mrs. Gump, your son is here. You know, like fetal alcohol is somewhere below the Mrs. Gump line. Okay, she says he's getting Fs in elementary school. And these are experts, right? We all deal with them. Getting Fs in elementary school. And I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it. It's one of those 2 in the morning aha moments, right? Where an F is an F. We all went to school, an F is an F, right? Well, apparently not in Chicago, because when you go in, F, it's fair. Look at all the F's he's getting in elementary school. Actually, he's doing just fine. Like, mentally retarded? Your guy's word, not so much. And he did fine in school. He's not Albert Einstein, but he's doing just fine with his IQ of 116. Then she goes, the R for third grade indicates remedial type classes. This is the R she's talking about. It's a P with a dash on it. The woman is completely full of shit. And this is all going down in front of a death-qualified jury and in front of a no-nonsense, hard-hitting, awesome Superior Court judge. And this is one of my favorites of all. I'm like, well, he did have affection in the home, and we've seen photos already. He had love. I mean, we got a photo of her grandma kissing him, and she goes, doesn't look like she's kissing him. Ma'am, you can probably see, and I had it projected behind her head. You can probably see it better behind you, ma'am. Doesn't look like she's kissing him. She might be whispering to him. She might be kissing him. You can't see that she's kissing him? No, there's daylight. There's air between his face and her face. It's like... He would not attend family functions. Well, I had this. That's his nephew's christening. So a review of Andrew Urdiales' life. Mother and father who loved him. He had a clean home, food to eat, toys to play with, a bike to ride, older brothers and sisters who loved him. Family vacations all over the country, including Disneyland. He was never physically abused by his parents. He had a big sister who stuck up for him with neighborhood bullies once. He had friends. He graduated from high school. He was accepted in the Marine Corps. He made more friends. He had a fiance. He was given great responsibility in the Marine Corps. He was put in charge of other people. He was promoted. In Operation Desert Storm, there's a thing called Task Force Ripper. Some of you guys don't remember this. They feigned an amphibious landing. And he was critical to that as a radioman, creating fake radio traffic, comes back with a combat medal, becomes a Union steward, described as our best guy, but he hated women, believed they were all whores, and he liked killing them. So this guy lived in Chicago, and he kept this storage container out there in Palm Springs, where he had his whole murder kit. Like some people keep skis or surfboards someplace. So he gets convicted. Here's some of our trial. A bunch of our jurors showed up, and the court allowed what's called a statement in allocution, which is when they allow the defendant, they don't have to in California, but they allow the defendant to make a statement. So you've got, it was a good reminder for me too, because even though a bunch of these women were sex workers, every single one of them had somebody in court. Everyone except for Denise Manny. And I didn't show you the gruesome photos there, but Denise was found naked. Her eyes had been taken out by the birds, and her throat had been cut. But the coroner out there, and a lot of pathologists are excellent, this guy mailed it in because she was decomping bad. Turns out she had a friggin' 45 caliber wound through the back of her neck that he missed. Okay, so the coroner kind of didn't give a shit. She had no family in there, and it allowed me to make the argument, ladies and gentlemen, you've noticed every single person has had somebody to make sure they get their day in court. Sex workers or not, they had people who loved them, except for Denise Manny. So you know whose job it is to make sure that she gets her day in court, ladies and gentlemen? It's your job. That's your job to do that, right? Like so the jury does them for death, which is for the family members, the death penalty debate is a hot thing, whatever. We got a moratorium in California. Nobody will ever be executed again, probably. But for the family members, it really is. It's worth the extra work. Because when the members of the community, in my opinion, who come in and say, your loved one, prostitute or not, was valuable enough, at least to you, and this guy is such a piece of shit that even though we know he's never going to be executed, you deserve to die for what you did. It's very cathartic for these families. So anyway, so we had our judge, Greg Prickett, who's the best of the best. He allows him to make a statement in allocution. So Urdiales comes in, and I didn't want to give him short shrift for his service in the Marine Corps. So it's like, this guy's an actual war hero. Look at the road he could have taken, but he chose to go the other way. Why do serial killers do this? Because they friggin' want to do it, right? So ladies and gentlemen, but we got to give him his due. He served his country honorably. He probably saved lives. I wanted to make that, I wanted to be honest, and I believe that. So he hears somebody for the first time out of his 3 death penalty trials saying good things about him, and I was nice to his family. I was nice to his brother. I was nice to his sister, because it's not their fault. And plus, you don't want to take a hit with the jury by going too hard on a family member who's innocent. So he comes in and he goes, and the whole jury showed up. And he goes, you know, I want to recognize the jury, and I want to thank the DA. He goes, your PowerPoint was so good. He goes, I want to thank him for being so nice to my brother and sister who testified. He goes, and to the members of the jury, I just want to tell you that if I was on the jury with you, I would have done the exact same thing. Okay? So I'm thinking he's just blowing smoke, saying the right things. He knows he's going to death row. He's a professional death row inmate at this point. California is actually nice as far as death rows go, believe it or not. So he's going up to a place where he's going to be comfortable. He's good at this. But he makes that statement, and he goes up, and 3 days later, hanged himself in his cell, which my trial partner and my law clerks and my investigators all believed we convinced him that he needed to carry out the sentence. And we'll never know, but that is the end of Andrew Urdiales, now dead. I can say all that because there's no appellate, nothing pending appellate-wise. So anyway, so that is the world of serial killers. I'm going to be around. Thank you so much.
If anybody has any questions, do you have that mic?
Yeah.
We have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
Sorry, we went a couple minutes long.
It's okay. Anyone? Questions?
Where'd you get all the pictures of the family and dating back?
So one of the awesome things about doing the criminal prosecution gig, and I'm sure I got some ex-prosecutors in here, when it comes to vertical units, I have the best investigators available to me, and they're hitting search warrants everywhere. And because he'd been tried twice, we got a bunch of stuff back from Illinois that they got in the search warrant. So that old grizzled Chicago cop who went in, they did a great job. So we got they took all that stuff from him in the original search warrant. So we had a couple hundred photos to go through, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So, anybody else?
Yep.
So in your mind, out of all of the cases you've had, what one stands out the most to you as just being the most, you know, I understand that all of them are horrible, but there has to be one that you just go, God, I can't wrap my head around.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of like 10 on 10 scales, but Joseph D'Angelo was disturbing. That was the Golden State Killer, the stuff that he would do, but the one that lives with me forever was the Tom and Jackie Hawks murder. That was the couple that was tied to their anchor and thrown off their yacht in Newport Beach begging for their lives. Skylar De Leon, who got a transgender, I believe they call it reassignment surgery, in one of those California ones. Famously, he's on death row, but we decided to give him $70,000 worth of medical stuff, full sex change, and breast augmentation, ladies.
And he was a former Power Ranger, kind of, right?
Yeah, he was a child actor in the Power Ranger. But that one probably disturbs me more than anything. Because, you know, we all had that conversation as kids around the campfire, like, what would be the worst way to go? Right after we're done with, like, who would win, a grizzly bear or a great white shark, you know? And we get into the burn to death, you know, freeze to death thing. And for me, it was always, Jackie Hawks was crying. And I've always thought, how do you hold your breath and cry at the same time? And that's kind of haunted me ever since. That one has really stuck with me.
How does this not affect you, seeing the worst of humanity doing the worst type of things like this?
So I love that question because it assumes that it didn't affect me. You know, and I'd love to say, hey, I surf with Jimmy, and that alleviates it. But the truth is, you know, where it impacts you a ton, especially the sex cases, is I became a very bad romantic partner for that. I was a lousy boyfriend for a lot of that time, trying to make up for that now. But yeah, it definitely affects you, and you hit a road, you hit a crossroads in homicide where you take one of two paths. You're either, everybody who goes in single stays single for the entire time they're there. If they go in married, they either get divorced, or worse than that, I think, they suck at the job. Okay, and for me, what I would always do, because it's vertical, right? I'm there the night the murder happens. I visit the autopsy. As soon as we figure out who to charge with what, the next thing I would personally always do is meet with the family members, give the moms, for some reason the moms still get to me, my personal cell phone, because they had to know that somebody cared. And I had a wonderful team that I got to work with, and they let us run our own little fiefdom back then. The DA's office has changed, unfortunately, down there now, but for the old DA, he really let us like eat what we kill. He would give us the support we needed, leave us alone, but it definitely impacts your life. And you know that dream we all have where we've got to study for the test, right? And for all of us in this room, you have to retake the bar exam, right? Like I've had that one a few times. For me, that has been changed into I'm standing up in front of a jury and I'm losing. And I got a jury who's not listening to me, and that's my nightmare. And I have it to this day about 3 times a week. That's my go-to stress dream. So,
Gary?
Yeah, thanks. After any of your trials where you become so close with the victim's family, obviously, have any of them stayed in touch with you over the years? Or just wondering how do they move on, or do they feel attached to you now?
No, unfortunately, in Orange County, these cases take years to come to trial. And I mean, I'm honored to say a lot of them do. Like Ryan Hawks, the son of Tom and Jackie, we're still in touch. The McLaughlin case, which is another big high-profile millionaire, gets murdered by his girlfriend, plot to body heat, and her NFL washout, Eric Naposki boyfriend, murdered him for money. I still get cookies every year on my birthday from the 2 daughters. So you bond with them, and you think about there's a special relationship, I think, for parents with the doctor who delivers your baby. You know, there's always going to be sort of that bond, and in a weird way, you become a significant part of their life. And for a lot of people most people will never experience it, but for a mother or father to lose their loved one is the worst thing a human being can ever experience. But to lose a loved one to murder is the worst of the worst. And to lose a loved one to a murderer who, sorry, fucks your child to death and then is on the verge of getting away with it, that's a special kind of bond because you become the person that is trying to save them from that. The only thing worse is that somebody kills your kid and gets away with it. And to kill them in a gruesome sexual way especially, it's you become an important part of their life. So to kind of follow up on that, I made a decision a couple of years in, and Jimmy was a part of that, which was a funny story. But I wound up deciding I was going all in. I had a bad breakup, and I decided, screw it. You know, like all these guys were getting married, all of our buddies were getting married, and I basically decided to marry my job. And then went on a run and won 52 murder cases. So I have no regrets. But truth is, as sick as it sounds, I still miss it every day. But.
Quick question. So I urge you all to watch the Hulu show that just dropped. Real quick, the guy cut off the penis, went to Iran, they get him back, then he escapes from prison, jail breaks, and on the couch, or on his bed in jail, is a picture of Matt. So how did that affect you when you found out the guy you just lured out from Iran, who escaped, left a picture of you on their bed?
So first of all, it's the coolest thing I ever got involved in because this guy, the bad guy got away, right? So the conventional move is you put a warrant in the system, you hope he comes back, and you hope for the best. Okay, that's what you do. But my detectives were so good, and I was the senior deputy in the unit at that point, and it was like, maybe we can do something here to actually catch this mother effer. So we flipped his wife, who is a peripheral member of the conspiracy, who's now a lawyer. We flip her, and we get her to lure him out of Iran. It takes us 2 years. We actually pull it off. We throw a net on him in the Czech Republic, which is a whole other story. We get him back, Orange County, maximum security facility, we're good. And then he friggin' escapes from jail, and it leaves my photo and my trial partner, who's one of my best friends, Heather Brown, her photo on the bunk. And we just had a text exchange, because this thing just went up a couple days ago, with the defense team, who are wonderful people and awesome trial lawyers. And Heather's whole thing was, it was the worst picture of me ever taken. And of all the photos, and she's like, thank God we never needed to put that into evidence, because I could not have lived with that. So yeah, so he was out and about, but at that point, I had no kids, I had no wife to protect, I lived by myself, and I thought for sure he went south, because you don't need an ID to cross into Mexico. There's an Iranian embassy, not just a consulate, but an embassy about 15 minutes from the border, and the way the sheriffs bungled it, he'd been gone for 18 hours by the time they noticed he was missing. And all he needed to do was head south. And for some reason, known only to God and the friggin' brain of Hussein Nairi, they went north instead. So we wound up catching him up north. And then we wind up trying him. And there's a clip Again, great cross-examination moments, or war stories, right? The older I get, the better I was. But he's on the stand. He testified, and he hated my guts because he's had all the discovery, and he knows I turned his wife against him. We outsmarted him, and the guy was very clever, and the scheme was diabolical. They planned it for months, and he's on the stand. And my final question was why they took the penis with them. They didn't just cut it off. So I'm like, okay, Mr. Nairi, everybody's wondering, when you cut it off, why couldn't you just leave it there and give the poor guy a chance to reattach it? And he looks at me, and this part's in the doc, and he goes, "You're done." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm done?" He goes, "I'll give you an answer to that personally." He goes, "You're done." And it's like, that sounds a little bit like a threat, Mr. Nair. And of course, as trial lawyers, we want that, right? Like, you want them to flash in front of the jury. And then I get to make the argument, which I'd been hoping for. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this. In between you, the people that are going to decide his fate, and a Superior Court judge, he threatens a senior deputy district attorney in a courtroom who's literally surrounded by armed police officers. Imagine what that guy's like in a van when none of us are there and he's not getting what he wanted. That's the kind of guy who would cut off a penis. So you want it. And the funny thing is that jury was out for like 5 freaking days. It's my last trial as a deputy DA. I had to be re-sworn to take the verdict. I'd get sworn back in. And that one is up on appeal. But the show is good. It's called Wicked Game, Devil in the Desert, and Hulu did it, and it's turned out great.
Bring some books.
What's that?
Did you bring some books?
No, because I'm a super good businessman. No, you can. My book is called The Book of Murder. You can find it. Actually, I think I have a slide on this. I do. Book of Murder, and the Audible, for whatever reason, I don't know, because I hate the sound of my own voice. The Audible is doing very well. You can download the Audible today and listen to it. But it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Disney Books, wherever. Disney decided to do it, which is super cool and really fun. But I think if you guys like stories like this, you really might like this. Or if you have friends who are true crime fans, my agent will kill me if I don't at least plug it.
I'm just curious if you ever dealt with any female psychopathics.
Yes. So the William McLaughlin case, that was basically the plot to Body Heat. Kathleen Turner, and for those of you who haven't watched that movie, it's like early 80s. It's fantastic. Mickey Rourke's first role, I think, in a movie. She was just like that. She manipulated her dumb kind of boyfriend guy who's an NFL washout named Eric Naposki, played outside linebacker for the Patriots until he washed out, and convinced him to murder her millionaire boyfriend to get it life insurance and everything else. That woman is a cold, true blue psychopath, for sure. They're fewer and far between, but there's plenty of women that commit murder and domestic violence situations too. We live in an egalitarian society, so did a bunch of those. Anything else? I'm really honored, guys, to have been here. I was super excited when I got the invitation for this, because it's this is such a great crew, and it's such a high level of what we do, and so I really appreciate it. I'm gonna be around. I'm around till Sunday, so hit me up. Any questions? I'd love to show you the quote of Dr. Dick Adler, which I do have on my computer. And thank you so much. What's that?
Did you put that doctor that said he invented?
So the first question the jury had is, how do we complain about these guys? No, they're still out there, still around. Yeah, still doing their thing.
Thank you, Matt, very much for doing this.